Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. We're out here today by the garlic patch because we have a really exciting harvest today. Now, as you can kind of see behind me, the garlic scapes are here, they're starting to curl, and that means it's ready to harvest them and make one of my favorite summer recipes, and that is garlic scape pesto. So garlic scapes are kind of fun. They're these twisty, curly little almost flower heads that come out of the center of the garlic plant. So garlic scapes are basically garlic's version of a flower. Garlic doesn't have a flower in the way that we really think of flowers, but this is basically how a garlic plant would reproduce in a way similar to seeds. So a few weeks before the garlic bulb is actually ready to harvest, if you're growing a hardneck garlic variety, it will send up what's called a scape in the center of the plant. Now this is harvested immature. If I allowed this to mature on the plant, eventually it would uncurl, it would stand straight up, and then see this little bulb on the end here? What would happen in here is it would basically form tiny little garlic cloves. Now, you know when you have a head of garlic, you break it apart, it has all those different little cloves there. Basically, this would get filled with a bunch of tiny little mini garlic cloves, and you could plant those almost like garlic seeds. And what would happen is it would take them a couple years to mature for you to actually be able to harvest a full-size garlic head, but eventually that is what would happen. Now, it's you kind of have to weigh the benefits and the costs of letting your garlic scapes mature. If you want to try propagating garlic that way, that can be a great way to do it. But the unfortunate thing that's going to happen if you let the scapes mature on your garlic plants is that a lot of the energy of the garlic plant will go into producing those little tiny garlic bulbs. They're called bulbils, if I'm pronouncing that right. So a lot of the energy of the plant will go into producing those instead of into producing a large garlic bulb. So while you will get the little mini garlic bulbs, you will be losing out on some size on your actual head of garlic. So you kind of got to decide what works best for you. I choose to harvest all of my garlic scapes. There's usually a couple by the end of the season that I miss, but I choose to harvest as many as I can, and one of the reasons is because they are so delicious. Garlic scapes are one of those special harvests that you're only really guaranteed to get if you are a gardener. Sometimes you might be able to find some at the farmer's market or occasionally a high-end grocery store that carries local produce. But for the most part, you're not going to be able to go down to your local Walmart or local grocery store and be able to find these. If you can, then consider yourself very blessed because that's very unusual to be able to find these. So they have a very short season, and for that reason, these are one of those delicacies that gardeners get to enjoy. Now, as an aside, if you do have some scapes that you're harvesting and you miss some, go ahead and eat some of those little garlic bulbils. They are delicious. As I said, I usually have a couple that I miss, and what I do is I like to take those out and just sprinkle them on my pizza. They're really good that way, but they'd be great sprinkled on any dish like that. Of course, if you want to plant some, go ahead and do that. But if you end up with extra, I propagate my garlic using the actual cloves of the garlic because I find that it's definitely a lot quicker to get a larger harvest that way. But if you do experiment with growing some of the garlic bulbils, or if you have in the past, I would love to hear your results because that's something that I have not tried, but it does seem like something that would be fun to try. But for today, I have plans to make some garlic scape pesto, which is one of my favorite summer garden treats. So we're going to go ahead and harvest some scapes. Then we're going to bring them into the kitchen, and I'm just going to show you my really quick and easy garlic scape pesto recipe. So I've got these 3 scapes that I've harvested already. I'm just going to look through here, my garlic patch, and see which other garlic scapes are ready to harvest. Now, you usually want to harvest your garlic scape. This one right here is ready when it has completed basically a full curl. This is when I like to harvest mine, because if you harvest it earlier, you're going to be robbing yourself of some of the harvest. Your scape won't be as large, and you won't have as much that you can do with it. But if you wait really longer than that, for one, it's going to start taking some of the energy of the plant that would be going into the garlic bulb and putting it into the scape instead. We obviously don't want that to happen. The other thing that can happen is as they sit on the plant, they start to get tough. So I want to harvest them before they get tough. I want to harvest them while they're tender and delicious and we can really enjoy them. For my scape recipe today, I am planning to, if I have enough scapes that are ready, hopefully make a double batch of this garlic scape pesto. For that, I'll need 20 garlic scapes. If I don't have enough that are ready, we'll just harvest 10 today, and I'll make another batch in a few days when the rest of these are ready. We've got 4, so let's get harvesting. So here's the scape harvest for the day. This is a couple more than 20. I think this is about 25 or so, but I had about that many that are ready. So what I'm going to do with the extras, I'm just going to stick them in a little glass of water and put them on my windowsill. What I find with the extras is that they'll keep in that water for a few days. You know, actually I've even kept them in there for a few weeks and they've still been fine. Usually the little bit of scape that touches the water might get a little slimy. So I usually cut that off when I go to use it. The rest of it's completely fine. And sometimes what happens, there have been times when I've let them go a little bit too long, and what happens is even with the energy that's in the scape, even when it's separated from the bulb, a lot of times the scapes that I leave in the water on my counter a little too long will go on to make those little bulbils. They have, in my experience anyway, been a little bit smaller than what happens if you leave them on the plant, but they're still completely usable and completely delicious. So when I have that happen, I consider that a little bonus treat, and as I said, I'll sprinkle them on my pizza right before it goes in the oven, or else sometimes I'll sprinkle them on some fresh green beans that I'm about to saute. It's delicious either way, so definitely worth enjoying. So let's head on into the kitchen and make some delicious pesto. Before we head into the kitchen, I want to show you guys something. So for those who've been following with my garlic as it grows, this big patch of garlic, the bulk of the garlic I'm growing, is my German white or German extra hardy garlic. I've seen it with both names. This is doing well. This has its scapes. Over here, this is elephant garlic, which I'm growing for the first time this year, and you can see it looks quite a bit different. The stalks do look really thick, which should indicate that it's going to have some sizable garlic bulbs, but the leaves don't look nearly as lush as my German white garlic, and these don't seem to be producing scapes. Garlic scapes are the bonus harvest that you get when you grow hardneck garlic. Softneck garlic doesn't produce scapes, but everything that I've heard and read said that elephant garlic should produce scapes. So I don't know, it's possible that it will produce scapes and it's just a little bit behind, or it's just a later variety than my German white garlic. So we'll keep an eye on the elephant garlic and see what happens. This is my first year growing elephant garlic, and you know, I'm here in Connecticut, and I don't think elephant garlic is ideally suited to my climate, so it's a little bit of an experiment. So just wanted to keep you posted on that. We'll see what happens as the season goes on. For the most part, we'll talk about this in the fall when it's time to actually plant garlic, but for the most part, you'll find that if you're in a cooler area of the country with harsh winters, hardneck garlic generally will grow better in your area of the country, and for the most part, softneck garlic grows better in warmer climates. Now that's not a hard and fast rule. There's obviously some wiggle room there. But me being in Connecticut, we get pretty cold winters here, so hardneck garlic has been what's historically been the most successful for me, so that's what I grow. And for the purposes of this video today, that is what provides the scapes, which are a delicious bonus harvest. Now on that note, let's head into the kitchen and make some delicious garlic scape pesto. So for our scape pesto recipe, I'm doubling this recipe, so I'm gonna take these 20 scapes here. I'm going to chop them up. So we're going to use most of the scape here. This little part on the end is a little bit tough, so I'm going to remove that. Some people also remove the bulb and don't use this, but I think that this tastes fine and the texture's fine. So I'm gonna keep this. We'll just take about this much on the end off, and I'm just going to chop the rest into about 1-inch pieces so that my food processor doesn't have to work quite as hard. I am going to go ahead and link this recipe in the video description, so if you watch this video and you're interested in trying this recipe yourself, go on and head over to the video description and the link will be right there for you. Additionally, I did make another garlic scape video about 2 years ago, and in there I shared a couple different ways that I like to cook garlic scapes. As of the time I'm filming this, that is actually my most viewed video of all time. And you know, it's actually from pretty early on in my channel, so sometimes it's a little bit interesting to go back and see really old videos, you know, before I was really comfortable with filming and editing. So if you watch that video, just give me a little grace for that. So I am going to, as I said, link the recipe. I'll link that video. For now, let's chop up these scapes and get them right into the food processor. We don't need to be all that precise with chopping these because the food processor is going to do most of the work. I'm just hoping to chop up a little bit and make it a little easier on the food processor. And then these tough ends here, I'm just going to go ahead and compost these. Before I add any other ingredients, I'm just going to chop up the scapes themselves, get them pretty much finely minced, and then we'll add the rest of our ingredients. So you can see how these are pretty finely minced in here. This is what we want. This is going to be minced up a little bit more, but we're just going to add the rest of our ingredients and let everything incorporate together. So I have here 2/3 of a cup of shredded Parmesan. We've got the juice of 1 whole lemon here. My lemon wasn't quite as juicy as I had hoped, so I kind of topped it off with a little bit of bottled lemon juice. So it's about 1/4 cup of lemon juice total. That's what I would expect to get from a juicy lemon, so that's what I added into my pesto. Next, I want 1/4 teaspoon of fine sea salt. A few grinds of black pepper here. I'm not really going to measure. Next, I have 2/3 of a cup of pine nuts here. I lightly toasted these just because that really enhances the flavor. That's an optional step, and I don't think the recipe calls for it, but I always like to do that just because I think, as I said, it adds a little more depth of flavor. Pine nuts are a little bit expensive, so if you wanted to substitute some other type of nut, walnuts, you know, a lot of people say walnuts would be good in there. I don't personally like walnuts. I prefer the really mild flavor of the pine nuts. You could try substituting almonds or some other type of nut in there instead. I like the pine nuts. I don't use them very often, so this is a nice little splurge. So I toasted these and let them cool because we don't want to worry about melting our cheese. Now they're added right into the food processor. Our final ingredient is olive oil, but I'm going to hold off on adding that until we have a chance to blend this all together with the food processor, just get everything chopped up and incorporated. And then I'm going to slowly drizzle in 2/3 of a cup of olive oil as it mixes. So I think I want to let it incorporate a little bit more. You can see some of these pieces are a little bit large, but I do want to scrape down the side of the food processor bowl and make sure that everything is evenly chopped and evenly incorporated. So we'll let this blend for another round. Everything should be pretty incorporated now, so I'm just going to make sure that it's as smooth as I want it before we add our oil. So this looks good. You can see there's a couple larger chunks in here, but not too many, and it will continue to break down a little bit more as we drizzle in the oil. So I have here 2/3 of a cup of olive oil measured out. I'm going to start this food processor back up and really slowly drizzle this in as it runs. Periodically, I may need to stop and scrape down the sides just to make sure that everything gets evenly incorporated because we want a really even mixture. So you can see how smooth it's getting. It's really coming together now that we've added the olive oil. So I'm just going to scrape down the side, run it a little bit longer, and then we'll give it a sample. So this looks really good, really smooth. That's what we want. I don't think I need to sample quite that much of it, but just got to see if it needs any salt or any other seasonings. That's really good. I might add maybe a hint more salt, but honestly, I don't think it even needs that. Between the salt that we added and the saltiness from the Parmesan cheese, this is really good. Now, there are so many ways you can use this. Honestly, my favorite way to use it is really simple. I just like to bake up some fresh sourdough bread, which I am going to go ahead and start as soon as I finish off this video here. But if I bake up some nice homemade bread, I like to be a little extra decadent and put a little bit of butter on the bread and then slather a layer of this garlic scape pesto on top of it. That's really good. And honestly, that's how we eat most of it. But it's really good as a condiment on sandwiches. It's definitely a condiment with some personality. So it's something you probably want to use a little sparingly unless you really like that zip. It's really good. Definitely recommend it. Some people do also make garlic scape pesto with basil in it. Basically, they use the garlic scapes to replace the garlic in a traditional pesto as opposed to using it to replace the basil in a traditional pesto. This recipe kind of uses it to replace both. And this is what I want. I have lots of basil growing in the garden, and later on in the season I'm going to make traditional basil pesto. But for right now, I really want the flavor of the garlic scapes to shine through. So this is what we did. You could definitely toss this with roasted potatoes. You could put it on some grilled chicken. You could put it on a sandwich. It would be really delicious any of those ways. Maybe drizzle it on some homemade pizza. So many different options. I definitely encourage you to make this. So you can see how beautiful and smooth it is as the finished product. So thank you so much for hanging out with me in the garden and now in the kitchen as we harvested garlic scapes and made garlic scape pesto together. I have a few garlic scapes here. These were extra, so they're just gonna stay in their little glass of water, and I'll enjoy those as we need them over the next couple days. I may let some of them, as I said, basically grow to maturity in this water here, and then we'll harvest the little garlic bulbils later in the season. So I definitely encourage you, if you have any way to access garlic scapes, to give this a try. I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.